So have a seat, gentlemen. Okay, so what I'm going to do for the second round, since I already gave my opening statement, is I'm going to introduce the folks I have up here. As I mentioned earlier, I've got 7 of the Combatant Command senior enlisted leaders here, and I've got 1 Sub-Unified Command, U.S. Forces Afghanistan here. So I'm going to start on the far left down here, and it's the Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. Transportation Command, Chief Master Sergeant Jay France. Next to him is the Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. NORAD Northcom, Sergeant Major Paul McKenna. Next to him is the Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. Forces Afghanistan, Resolute Support, and every other acronym that comes out of Afghanistan, Command Sergeant Major Tim Matheny. Immediately to my left is Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. Indo-PACOM, Sergeant Major Anthony Spadaro. Immediate right is the Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. European Command, Fleet Master Chief Chris Addington. To his immediate right is the Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. Southern Command, Sergeant Major Brian Zickafoose. Next to him is the Command Senior Enlisted Leader, the new Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. Special Operations Command, Chief Master Sergeant Greg Smith. And last but not least on the end is the Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. Cyber Command National Security Agency, Master Gunnery Sergeant Scott Stalker. And with that, we will take your questions. Sir.
So I think this may be a question probably for you and for Gunnery Sergeant Stalker. So Congress, for the officer side of things, has kind of broken up the promotion system, made things a little less rigid. Do you see any need for that in the enlisted side for recruiting reasons, for retainment reasons, and changing the way that retention control points are used? Or, you know, I don't know about direct commissioning, but maybe like bringing someone in at a sergeant level rather than bringing them all the way up from a private level, those sorts of changes.
So, as I mentioned in my opening statement, the strength of our military is our enlisted force, and the backbone is our enlisted leaders, those non-commissioned officers and petty officers that are executing mission command on any given day. And that didn't just happen overnight, that all of a sudden we can trust and empower them to get after. It's through a process of service, indoctrination, and education that has brought them up to this requisite rank that they're at through education and experiences, but also exposure in the joint world and through joint education. So in terms of building the leaders that we need on the enlisted side to get after the men and women after every day and get them to reach their untapped potential, have them ready to fight and win, and make sure that we're taking care of them and their family. Our process through our non-commissioned officer and petty officer education system is critical in building the leaders we need for this dynamic environment. And because cyber is a growing warfighting domain that we have to pay attention to, I will turn it over to Master Gunnery Sergeant Stalker to talk about cybercom and NSAs.
Thanks, Yak. Thank you for the question. So we talked earlier about recruiting and how that's impacting us. I can tell you for recruiting purposes, we're getting the talent that we need. But to your greater point on retention, we're looking with the services to see what are some alternative options available to keeping in talent. Oftentimes, as I talk to the troops that are executing mission, it's more about the ability to stay on mission, vice a lot of PCSing and other things, and so we're looking at those as options. The uniqueness, though, of Cyber Command and the National Security Agency is actually rank doesn't always equate to capability. It's sometimes you're more junior enlisted, and we spent the day there yesterday, the entire DCELC, and most of the briefers with the subject matter expertise were these E5s and E6s who are on mission every single day against our adversaries. And so we're looking across the entire spectrum, coming up with different ideas, whether that's an opportunity to have initial contracts that are longer, potentially working with industry, academia, all of the above in order to retain our most exquisite talent.
If I could just follow up,
yeah.
You know, are there any just larger talent management issues that you think need to change just in the organizational and that kind of stuff?
Well, I think we need to continue to look at what the American society is providing. I will tell you one of the challenges we have in terms of recruiting is the requisite number of men and women that meet our basic standards that can enter service, and that's around 25% right now. So I think more and more there has to be this partnership, as I mentioned in the first press conference, between our recruiters out there that are doing phenomenal work in getting after talent and those influencers in the community, and also to continue to impress upon these influencers the requisite talent we need, and to focus men and women that want to serve in the military. Now, I will offer up to anybody else if you have any comments on the gentleman's question. Anybody? Good? No. Okay. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Who else? Christina?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes.
My question is for Master Sergeant Smith. So most of the casualties now in Iraq and Afghanistan are special operations forces. The op tempo has slowed down a little bit for the conventional forces, but have stayed the same, maybe even gone up for special operations forces. I think McRaven was, I think he was the first to talk about the fraying of the force. I was wondering, what is the status of the force today? How are they handling the op tempo?
So in 2008, Admiral Olson appeared before Congress, and he talked about what we call pressure on the force, which then in 2011, Admiral McRaven expanded that to preservation of the force, and then it expanded even more to preservation in the force and families, or POTIF, as many people here will know. And that has been instrumental into the effectiveness of Special Operations Forces. And while I'm new to the command position, 25 years in this command, I'm intimately familiar with that. While it is true the majority of casualties have been Special Operations Forces, the majority of the missions and some of the intricate missions or tasks or objectives we've been asked to accomplish have unfortunately or fortunately fallen to Special Operations Forces. I will tell you the readiness of the force right now is at an all-time high right now. We're actually at a 25% reduction on global soft taskings of what we had, because we've re-looked at how we're aligned and how we're prosecuting these missions to make sure that readiness stays at its highest level.
Could you expand on that a little bit more?
Sure. So on any given day, a certain number of SOF members are deployed, and that number changes. So I don't want to give you a number and it be a bad number, but I will tell you that in the last 24 to 36 months, we have done a very hard look at looking at only those taskings that Special Operations Forces can do. So through that process, we've slowly brought down our operational tempo to meet the 1 to 2 Secretary of Defense guidance, deploy to dweller PERS tempo guidance. That has been an instrumental piece as we talk about both casualties, increasing readiness, and making sure we're able to accomplish whatever mission we are to task. So the POTIF initiatives have helped us with our family and individual readiness in terms of human performance and social performance. Soft taskings have aligned us with readiness for the force going forward, and then these missions that we're able to do, we're able to focus on making sure our readiness is up for those.
Christine, I'm going to ask the U.S. Forces Afghanistan senior enlisted leader to comment, since he lives in that environment.
So I would say one thing that we've changed as we looked at soldier readiness and the wellness of the force is how we're rotating units in and out of Afghanistan. So they're obviously a unit that's getting ready to go gets increased personnel to max out what their authorization is under their boots on the ground number. But then we have the ability to tailor that to either shorten that rotation or lengthen that rotation based on the time of year, based on the enemy contact, and then we can request assistance from some of our partner forces. And the operations are partner force driven, so it's Afghans out front where the SOF is just training, advising, and assisting to the point of need.
Jeff?
Thank you. For the Command Sergeant Major of Resolute Support, can you talk about what new steps are being taken to avoid green on blue attacks?
So one, it's awareness, and the lesson that I've learned over the last 12 months there is you're really fighting in 3 domains simultaneously. So your military operations are in support of political objectives, which we're working towards a negotiated settlement. But it's the information space and understanding how both the Afghan army and our enemy are using that space to combat both U.S. and coalition forces. A perfect example is the Razak assassination last year. that was probably the direct result of 3 different blue-on-green attacks, or green-on-blue attacks, I'm sorry, was because the Taliban was able to spin that narrative that it was a U.S. conspiracy in order to do this, and we didn't catch on to it for about a week and a half. So once we were able to get that to our partner forces, to get the local government officials to come out against that, and it's just understanding that how that information environment, that's a fight. So it's learning to compete, but then it's also informing our forces on what to look for, and then providing our guardian angel training to our uplift.
Sir, what was the conspiracy theory the Taliban were promoting?
It was the General Razik assassination down in Helmand.
They said that the United States was behind that.
Yeah, it was pretty widely disseminated through different forms of social media.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian.
Yes, so 2 questions. First, to you, Sergeant Major Spadaro. I think last time you were here, or 2 times before, North Korea had actually fired off a missile or something while we were having the briefing, or immediately before. The situation in Korea has changed a lot since some of the major training exercises have been curtailed or changed. Can you talk about what, if any, effect that has had on the forces in Korea in terms of their readiness?
Yeah, no, that's a great one. You know what? We've seen an uplift because now the exercises, the unique thing now is the balance between the Republic of Korean forces that are involved with us. We've seen now that this is better than ever. So even from the times when Command Sgt Major Troxell was there till now, you see this awareness on the peninsula between both the U.S. and ROK Armed Forces that they use the term kapshi kapshida. We go together. I've never seen that more evident within the last year. 3 different visits, talking to the 28.5K that we have there now, and there's this awareness that you could take the term exercise, but they're getting after it. So there's also ways to do exercising that you see this increase of, but more you're seeing that it's the ROK-led forces that are leading that, with the U.S. now in this almost coaching mentoring stage, and you're seeing them taking more advantage of these exercises that we're doing. So it's been an incredible uplift over there. And it's truly now we're going to see the differences, just even from morale, from readiness standpoints. I think it's the best that I've seen it.
So if I could add on, Ryan, so the chairman talks all the time about sets and reps as a way to get proficient at what we're doing. And in terms of partnership, like Sergeant Major Spadaro said, the more we can engage with our partners, especially when they look at our non-commissioned officers and petty officers and the level of trust and the level of responsibility that's given to them, the more that we are engaged with them in showing them how we do business, the more they will, in some cases, either adopt or they will try to mimic what we're trying to do because they see how effective it is. And I will tell you that when I was on the Korean Peninsula, and whenever I was going to visit either 3rd ROK Army or 1st ROK Army and meet with the commanding general, I would take 3 non-commissioned officers or petty officers with me because I wanted them to see what we were empowering these individuals to do to get after the deterrence mission at that time. So I think more and more through our partners and allies, we have to continue to build on this enlisted focus in education. And I'm going to ask Fleet Addington to talk about the practices they're doing in the EUCOM to assist those NATO countries in getting after this as well.
So I just think when you talk across the EUCOM AOR, sets and reps, exercising with our partners, developing interoperability is vitally important to deterrence and making sure that we don't ever have the worst day, right? That we're all prepared and we're ready. And that's vital, and it's important that we continue to train and train with our partners because you don't really learn each other, and you don't get that until you've operated together, and so that's just vitally important as we work through the various exercises, whether it's in the Med, whether it's in the high north, whether it's across the European continent. It's looking at 360 and building a team of partners as we work through.
And just to follow, this may not be as much of an issue in Korea or with EUCOM, but one of the things you talk to U.S. advisors on the ground in places like Afghanistan or in Africa, that NCO Corps is one of the least developed things in one of these militaries we're trying to kind of build from the ground up. Very hard to create overnight. You have lieutenants in some of these militaries performing duties that in a U.S. force would be typically performed by an NCO. Is that a real challenge in kind of building that culture kind of in a relatively quick, having to be forced to create that relatively quickly?
So Ryan, I'll make a few comments, and Greg, I'm going to ask you to talk about Africa, and then Tim, I'll ask you to talk about Afghanistan. So the AFRICOM senior enlisted leader, he's not here today, he's got a little event going on Friday called the AFRICOM Change of Command that he's got to be present for as he gets General Townsend, his new boss. But since he's been in position over the past 3 years, he has taken the enlisted development of African countries from where it was almost non-existent to where in August he is running his AFRICOM Senior Enlisted Leader Conference. And now out of those 53 nations that are in Africa, 34 or somewhere around there are sending senior enlisted leaders. Some of those countries, like Botswana, not only send my counterpart, but they send all of their service senior enlisted leaders there too. And then what he's done in terms of building a part of the AFRICOM strategy, enlisted development, has been huge in getting after that. Now, having said that, these are baby steps, okay, because there's a long way to go. And I'm going to ask Greg Smith to talk because his guys are out there on any given day partnering with these folks out there. So go ahead.
Thanks, Sergeant Major. So one of the great competitive advantages we have in special operations is culturally aware small teams, relatively low political capital spent for a higher payoff. We leverage a couple different things. So one is assessment of the team on the ground in a relatively short span of time. We're able to give that geographic combatant commander a fair assessment of what the potential capability is of that. We also work by, with, and through embassy and our GCC, or Geographic Combatant Command senior enlisted leaders. I can give you an example. I want to kind of shift this to South America because I think it's a really good example where just today I have a theater special operations command with teams on the ground that we put in support of Southcom, and those teams do an assessment, partner with our host nation partners, and then provide that assessment back up to Sergeant Major Zickfuss to determine how they now see the employment according to their theater campaign plan.
So if you don't mind, sir. Yeah. So one of the things we do is develop professional military forces, and to do that, the NCO Corps is a big, vital part of that piece. We started regional conferences about 3 years ago. When I first did that first regional conference, I had one or two senior enlisted leaders in that whole piece. Over the years, we've engaged with their chief defenses, and now I'm having multiple. Like this next one I'm doing out in Brazil, we have over 31 different senior enlisted leaders involved in this NCO development. So this has grown. It's huge. It's a part about developing a professional force, developing those, securing our nation is securing their nations.
And one small follow-up on that is just our Joint Special Operations University works with the geographic commands, right? We go down and in small teams look at how to do NCO development and then how to do joint development. Integrate and then interoperability are the two key pieces there.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So you'll hear us talk a lot about reliable partners and finding those reliable partners in our ANDSF forces that are going to perform. And so I'll tell you that I travel all over the country, and every time I go to a U.S. or coalition base that's got an Afghan base, I take the Afghan Sergeant Major of the Army with me, or the Afghan SEAC, so that they see that we're a unified front. And the interesting piece is, so over the last year and a half, if you went out to the commando, the KMTC, the Kabul Military Training Center, or one of the other local bases there in the Kabul base cluster, you will see Afghans training Afghans. It's very little instruction. They're on to the next level.
And so just to finish up, Ryan, the best way to get after this is, I think it's got to be top-down driven and bottom-up driven. So the Chief of Defense has to have a senior enlisted person that has served in the military and has been at the ranks at the lowest level that can advise them best on how to do the force. And if you look at this group up here, across the time that we've all been in there, we've had over 20 countries that have adopted a senior enlisted advisor to the Chief of Defense. Mm-hmm. But then you have to have solid first line leaders that can execute the everyday discipline, training, and things like that. So the ability to develop that professional non-commissioned officer corps, like Sergeant Major Zickerfuss mentioned, is important as well. So it's got to kind of go this way and meet in the middle to be best effective. Sir, go ahead.
Yeah, for Command Sergeant Major Matheny, there was some discussion in the previous panel. It was about recruitment and retention, and the feeling seemed to be that the ability to deploy, wanting to deploy, was a factor in recruiting and retention. The question I'm trying to get to is 18 going on 19 years now in Afghanistan. Are there any numbers, any indications you might have that Afghanistan is having a negative effect on recruitment and retention?
No, sir. I would actually say it's quite the opposite. And our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines are actually disappointed when we tell them that we have a force cap and we're not going to be able to bring them all into theater. We even look at how we can rotate different organizations in and out from the United States. One, to remain relevant and fresh with our new troopers, but also to make sure that everybody gets a rotation and gets that combat deployment that they're seeking so badly. Our retention rate in theater right now is about 108%.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question to Commander Spadaro. I hope I didn't pronounce your name wrong. What kind of role, in your opinion, Taiwan can play in the Indo-Pacific strategy in a military way, especially when China is getting more and more aggressive in the region and Taiwan faces a direct threat from Beijing?
The first part of the question, though?
What kind of role Taiwan can play or take in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, I'd like to comment, just even feeding on what Sergeant Major Troxell just said, that Taiwan was one of the nations that started the SEAC position based on a visit from Command Sergeant Major Troxell as directed. So they're moving out even more, and I'd like to talk more about their growth and their explosive growth of how they're viewing non-commissioned officers. Specifically, now their entire enlisted education is done by Enlisted. So when we're talking here about the success stories that we're working along like-minded partners and allies, there you see a success story where they adapt the SEAC position, so now they're saying they value enlisted personnel, and now to the turning point where their professional military education is conducted by non-commissioned officers.
Transcom question. I know you thought that you were going to get out of this. There's been a few issues with moving for people, and losing items, things like that. Do you have any update as to how that's been in this summer, considering this is the big moving season, and then where things might be going in the future, what sort of policies, procedures you're working on?
Yeah, so it's a little too early to tell exactly what this summer is looking like, because it does take us a while to get good quality data that would be worth sharing. But we do track that and have an update every single week on how we're performing this year. As far as efforts for the future, Transcom is exploring on behalf of the Department of Defense going to a single move manager that will address a couple things, or three things actually: quality, capacity, and curbside service for our service members and their families, establishing clear responsibility throughout the entire move process, and also establishing clear accountability, whereas currently we have Transcom doing several things in the process, the services having responsibilities and executing things differently. We're trying to wrap all that up and go to one single move manager, so Transcom and that single move manager can have that discussion rather than trying to figure out where the problem is to get after that.
Are there concerns within the force about a single move manager versus having the government do it?
I will frame it this way. Every single question, and believe it or not, I do get plenty of phone calls and emails on this issue. Every single question, every story, every vignette that has been shared with me during my 8 months in the seat is being answered by the direction we're trying to go with that single move manager. Been in for 29 years, have a young family, 14 moves within that. So my experiences that I brought in there personally, plus all of the feedback that I get and those experiences that people have had over a number of years, every single thing that has been brought to my attention is something that we're trying to get after in this single move manager in this contract. So I'm confident that we're going in
Hold
a
on,
great
Christine.
direction.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Ryan Picard with Business Insider. I have a question for Chief Master Sergeant Smith. The special operations community has been increasingly the focus of high-profile scandals, and I wanted to get your opinion. I understand you're new, but I want to get your take on whether or not there's a culture of lawlessness spreading through the special operations community, and how is certain cultural failings within that community being addressed?
Absolutely. So as part of the last year's NDAA, Congress directed SOCOM take a good look at itself and do a 90-day assessment. We're finishing that 90-day assessment right now. When General Clark took command of U.S. Special Operations Command on the 29th of March, his very first commander's call, 4 hours of that focus were on how do we see ourselves as culture, right, within our soft culture. And is this a byproduct of 18 years or 25 years or 30 years, depending on how you look at the models of sustained conflict? And the answer is no, but there are some interesting things that have come out of a really good hard look. Every single component within Special Operations Command took a substantial internal look at itself and reported those factors back up. And really it all comes down to a function of leadership, a function of what is the cost of winning? Do you win at any cost? You know, and is your loyalty to the nation, to the team, to the individual, those types of things. So through our PME, our professional military education, both internally and across, we've reinstituted a really significant hard look at ourselves right now and where we're at going forward. So we did both the Commanders Conference, we did 2 additional conferences at the 100-day mark for General Clark, and then our interactions with Congress following this up, but most importantly, interaction at the team level right now. Over 2,500 pages and 17 hours worth of deep diving internal to take a look at our culture, which will then turn into our action plan going forward. So do we have an issue? No. We have challenges, we have fraying, but are these things systemic? No, after the hard look. Is there room for improvement? Is any one ethical breach too much? Yes.
So if I could add on that right quick, and I'm going to ask Sergeant Major McKenna from NORTHCOM to talk. So the Southwest Border is a mission that we have right now, and it's a mission that our forces generally haven't done in the past, but they're adapting to it on the ground. And Sergeant Major McKenna has been down to the Southwest Border several times. So can you talk about you know, the adaptation to the environment down there and what the Marines and soldiers are doing to get after that mission down there?
Absolutely, SEAC. So many of you might know that we've been after this from a Title X perspective since October of last year. We currently have about 3,047 soldiers and Marines, Title X forces on the border. We're probably at request for assistance from DHS. I think it's 9 now. But I would tell you there's been a lot of concerns from a readiness standpoint. And I would offer you that the men and women that are assigned this mission are very enthusiastic, and they couldn't be more passionate about the defense of the homeland. As a matter of fact, I will tell you a story. When I was down there probably about 4 months ago, I ran across a group of Marines that were performing the mobile surveillance camera mission. And just what you'd expect, there was a group of Marines living in very Spartan conditions. And as I walked up to this young E6, who was in charge of about 40 Marines, he had written on a whiteboard something that really caught my attention. And it wasn't what I really expected to see. You know, when I see a group of infantry Marines, I expect to see a gear list or things to do list. But what was written on the board was something that was really profound. And what he wrote in big, bold letters was, everyone you meet today is dealing with something you know nothing about, ... So be kind. And I mean, that just really almost had to take a knee, because when I asked the staff sergeant, I said, hey, why did you write that? And he said, well, it's twofold, Sergeant Major. He said, one, the majority of my Marines are just coming back from Afghanistan, and they might be dealing with something and I want to make sure they know they can talk to not only me, but one another. But more importantly, I want all the Marines here to know that 99% of the people that are, part of these caravans coming to our country are good people, and they're just seeking a better way of life. And I want to make sure that they have a level of empathy if they do come in contact with these migrants. So that's the level of character and the level of leadership that these young men and women that are on the border protecting our homeland, quite frankly. So I hope that highlights that or illustrates it for you well enough, SEAC.
Okay. All right, Christina.
Okay, thank you. You just took my question, my border question. So I'll move on to Sergeant Major Spadaro. I wanted to ask you about your comments on Taiwan. Over what time period have those changes you spoke about occurred, and how does that compare to the Chinese enlisted force?
I can tell you from Taiwan, it's been a process of over 2 years. Commenting, I don't know enough about the Chinese forces to recognize at this point. I know we just have to be prepared for them. And I do know from everyone at this table here recognizes that readiness. And I don't see we have that issue with readiness with our forces right now. I see commitment. And now it's trying to understand whatever inevitability may face us based off whatever adversarial challenge we have. I think everyone here would agree, though, we have a ready force that's going to support and defend and do what's necessary.
Can you comment about readiness as you've seen it over the last 2 years now that the defense budgets have gone up and
Indo-PACOM is a benefactor of the largesse of Congress, and we are extremely grateful because it's allowing for our constant presence in the Indo-Pacific region. So when you look at just our span of control, it's half of the world. So readiness has never stopped, and it's never changed there. So whatever we've heard in the past, we've seen the increase of readiness. It's every day. It's freedom of navigation operations that are on a continuum. It's either from the air, it's from the sea. And it's also to ensure that we're also doing this for our allies and partners. Because our allies and partners watch this. So they're also seeing the largesse of Congress. So that's also a signal to them that we are in it and we're committed to the region. So there's also, you have to look at that there's offshoots of the largesse of Congress, and that the benefactor is that now we could also deal more effectively with allies and partners.
I want to go back and just chime in on the first question you asked. So when we talk about our non-commissioned officers and petty officers, we train them to be transformational leaders, meaning we expect them to not only train and prepare their men and women to fight and win whatever their specialty is, but we expect them to provide purpose, motivation, direction, and discipline. And so that their transformation, they are building the men and women to something. And the reason I say we have the greatest non-commissioned officer and petty officer corps in the world, other countries, like China, it's more transactional leadership. Do what I tell you to do because I outrank you. Okay, you don't need to know why, just execute. And when you talk about high-end conflict and how that could devolve into decentralized kind of fighting, what an advantage for us is those enlisted leaders out there that understand commander's intent. They've been trained to execute mission command using agile and adaptive thinking and practices and methods to accomplish the mission and to continue to fight and win. That's going to continue to be our competitive advantage, is how we invest in our people. And I was going to ask Sergeant Major Zickerfuss if you could comment. You mentioned a little bit earlier, but some of the things you're doing down there with those countries in South America to build that NCO professionalism.
So our partner nations, they want NCO development. They could ask China or Russia to do that piece in reality, but they ask us to be that, that force that comes to train them. For instance, we were just in Costa Rica, had the Costa Rica Defense Force. They asked us to come in and help them train their defense force, their NCOs at the junior level all the way up to the senior level. We do soft NCOs, we do junior NCOs, and we do senior enlisted NCOs. So we're very ingrained into it. We talk about human rights, talent management. Talent management is also gender integration, jointness, and then NCO development. All four of those bring together. NCO development is that core that brings it all together, makes it happen, makes all those four elements work together.
Jeff, go ahead.
Thank you. A follow-up question for Command For Chief Master Sergeant Gregory Smith, sorry, I was about to call you Command Sergeant Major.
It happens all the time.
You were asked about the incidents of criminality. The ones that come to my mind all involve SEALs. You have the Metzger homicide, Gallagher, Portier, and now the report about cocaine use in SEAL Team 10. So my question is, what is going on with the SEALs?
Yeah, so we don't ever comment on ongoing investigations, as you know, and many of these cases are ongoing right now. I will tell you that while best way to say it is probably ours always seem to make headlines right away, right? So, which is for good reason. I mean, anytime we have ethical breaches, those things should be brought up. I will tell you that Naval Special Warfare Command and Admiral Green and Force Master Chief King out there have done a phenomenal job taking a good look all the way through their formation. And are there challenges, or are there areas that we can do better? Every day we can. We do not have a systemic problem. We have we have a pretty wide or a pretty large population of Naval Special Warfare, and by overwhelmingly that vast majority, 99.8%, are at the top of the line. These ethical breaches affect the entire command and affect the credibility of our entire force. So we take that very, very seriously as we take a good look internal. General Clark and I will be out at Coronado next week, as a matter of fact, to spend time with our SEAL community and absolutely reinforce the values that we do as a Special Operations Command and as soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, part of this force.
Thank you. One of the SEALs who pleaded guilty in the Metzger case said that binding people up with duct tape by their hands and ankles is a common disciplinary procedure in the Special Operations community. Are you aware of this?
So I have been in this community for 25 of my 30 years, and I have never been exposed, seen or heard of binding people up as common practice within our community. And that is within the joint force. So I have been across this joint force extensively for 25 years, and I've never seen nor heard that. Sir.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I did want to follow up on an earlier question for Chief Master Sergeant Smith there. Sorry to just keep running this.
Lucky day, I see, absolutely.
But looking at the accountability within leadership, some of the reports that have come out have been where leaders have, one, discouraged SEALs from reporting suspected crimes, or in the case of the cocaine use, as was reported, it was lax testing. Are you concerned about accountability at those higher levels, not necessarily at the lower unit level or squad level?
Yeah, so one of General Clark's primary areas is accountability across the formation. Everybody is accountable, especially the leadership. More so than anything, the leadership is responsible for establishing the culture. Right, so we're taking a good hard look across the formation right now at where accountability lies, when and where we have any ethical or disciplinary breaches. Where do we hold those people accountable, and who should be accountable? Who should have known? Who did know? And what are we doing about it? So that's the ongoing part of our assessment right now that we're doing. I will tell you that we've taken a really hard look at this, and while we don't always publish accountability, we've been holding significant leadership accountable.
Who?
So,
yeah. What can you say? Who's been held accountable?
Yeah. So within our formations, a lot of our leaders, as far as platoon leaders, section leaders, we've held the appropriate accountability right now, and I'll follow up with you on that as far as if we have any specifics on that. But,
so this question kind of gets to a global combatant command like Special Operations Command. Cyber Command NSA is another command like that. So Scott, can you kind of talk about some of the things that you're doing within your command as you've got this dispersed force to make sure that we're still getting after, the discipline and things we need to get after out there?
Absolutely. So one of the topics you touched on was fitness, actually. And when you think of a cerebral force like Cyber Command, you may not necessarily think of fitness as a key attribute. But to be really sharp and to be on target on your computer for 8-12 hours a day, that physical fitness translates into mental fitness. And so one of the areas that the leadership there at Cyber Command and NSA and myself have worked on is really the culture, the mindset of a warfighting culture. Because as we know, we have a gamut of priorities. The 2+3 has been laid out. But there's also other things that we have to do from a whole government approach. And so we have to look at election security. How do we support Homeland Security, the FBI, and so on and so forth. And so for us, it's all about inculcating a warfighting mindset and a warfighting culture so that we can get after some of the discipline issues and challenges. And to date, we haven't really had any significant disciplinary issues.
I will tell you, just to finish off on that one, is nothing solves problems better than engaged leadership that is providing that purpose, motivation, and direction, but also is enforcing standards and instilling discipline on the force. Sometimes we're doing missions and we're doing sets and reps over and over and over, and it's easy for complacency to set in on the force. Leaders have to be cognizant of that, especially non-commissioned and petty officers, and they have to make sure that they step in and take action when things are starting to go the wrong way. Okay, I think we can do one more question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, could I ask Sergeant Major Spadaro, talk used to be a couple of years ago, rebalance of forces to the Indo-Pacific. It's supposed to be 60% of the force, Indo-Pacific. Where does that stand? Is that still the overall plan? Are we really having this Pacific pivot, or has that been shelved?
Sir, we never left. We never left. The United States is a Pacific nation. We're still at 60% of our operationalized forces. We're positioned and ready. This is west of the date line. When you look at the forces that we have positioned in Japan, I mean, U.S. Indo-PACOM is 377,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines. We have Coast Guardsmen, we have Department of Defense civilians. We're spread everywhere from California and CONUS to Alaska to Hawaii. But our ready forces are already positioned in Japan and Korea. We have the 7th Fleet positioned throughout there moving. We have our air forces, so we've never left. So we don't ever say that we're regaining the advantage, but as far as a pivot or a rebalance, it's never changed.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. This is not only important so that you hear about the troops and the force and everything, but it's important for us to have a relationship with you all, because you all tell the story of the men and women and how they're doing in this contested, dynamic environment that I spoke of earlier. So the more we have a professional relationship with you all, the better we can tell you the story, because we're the ones out there that are at the boot level seeing what the troops are doing, whether it's on the southwest border or whether it's in South America, Europe, or whether it's in somebody's house looking at their household goods, or at Military Sea Lift Command or Air Mobility Command, to say it better, okay? But the more we have relationships with you, the better we can communicate that to you, and the better that it is for us being in front of the media like you. So I thank you for this opportunity on behalf of all of these senior enlisted leaders, and we look forward to engagements in the future as we move forward. And I can tell you, anytime one of these guys are in the building, Mr. Mack, we're going to run them by just to have a chat if they have to, so they can update you on what the great men and women of the United States military and our allies and partners are doing. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And tomorrow morning we're going to do a dynamic PT session at 6 a.m. that if you want to join us, come on out. We're going to carry rocks, tires, ropes, logs, and we might even pick up a few Jeeps out there and carry them around. But we're going to get after this functional fitness here. So validating our credentials to lead the men and women. And if we aren't setting that example at this level for fitness and health, then we can't expect anybody below us to get after. So thank you very much, and have a great day.